All right, thank you very much, Frank. It is 9:19. We're back. Laramie Live on KOWB continues with our Mondays with the Mayor series. David Settle joined in studio by Mayor Andrea Summerville. How are you? How's the 2018 going so far?
Pretty good, pretty uneventful. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So we usually do this on the first Monday, but nobody was around here last Monday.
No,
Let's just put it that way.
We took that Monday off.
Yeah. Well, I hope you did at least. Took some time off around the holidays, but. All right, well, let's start with the lovely thing that we've been discussing for, I don't know, seems like a year now, basically. Okay, maybe not quite extensively, though, but been a lot of discussion since this got brought up back, I want to say going back to mid-October or so, somewhere around there. Snow removal policy. It got brought up a couple months back, and we talked about, you know, that you guys were going to be looking at what should we do? Should we do this? Should we do that? And so then last Tuesday at your meeting, decide to postpone the decision for a month because of maybe adding some language for a second notice to citizens. So talk a little bit about where do we stand right now. Let's begin with that, and then I want to get into a couple other things with this.
So where we stand right now, we had third reading last week, and we had a few amendments that got put on the floor. And one of those amendments was to specifically discuss adding that second, basically, notice before the city could use the nuisance and abatement procedures to come remove snow from your sidewalks.
Okay.
The way it was written right now, you would get one 24-hour notice, and then the city would be able to come in and use those nuisance and abatement procedures to remove snow, and then you would be responsible for the bill for the contractor as well as an administrative fee to the city of Laramie. Now, we want to make clear, we don't think that the city is going to come out and do that to everybody. That's not a major enforcement tool. Those nuisance and abatement procedures are really used for serious concerns, serious public safety hazards, things along those lines. So that amendment passed, but it needs some refinement and some language, and council wanted to, I think, consider a couple of options on how to do a second notice per se before we got to that abatement procedure. So we've given the city staff 4 weeks to kind of go through that and then bring it back to us.
All right, so we're looking at language, and the city attorney always has to take a look at that to make sure everything's on the up and up.
Absolutely.
So we've had plenty of feedback on our social media platform, and I think we hear from every negative person out there. Maybe that's just me, but okay, stranger things have happened. What has the feedback been from folks that have contacted you or others on the city council, or what has been some of the comments that you've heard from folks that have come to some of the city council meetings about this? The discussion about updating the snow removal policy.
Well, we're talking about it because we had some citizens come forward and say this just isn't cutting it. Primarily, the complaints were coming from the tree area and people that walk to work, or that area has a heavy pedestrian traffic pattern. Kids going to school, people going to work at the university, and so on. So we had some complaints there. So we've had a few people that are supportive of the changes and have asked for the changes. But I will tell you, by far and away, the comments that I've received have not been positive for what's being proposed right now. There's a lot of concern about being able to meet that criteria. There was some concern brought to me through some phone calls and email. And I know it was discussed a little bit on Laramie Live's comments about that abatement procedure and at what point should the city really be coming in and removing snow from people's sidewalks.
Well, it's one of those situations where, okay, from a personal standpoint, I say, hey, this is my civic duty. I need to keep my sidewalks clean. I have brought up, even on this program, the fact of, well, if you don't want to get out there and do that, well, just think of if somebody is walking down your sidewalk, slips and falls, you can be sued as a property owner.
Absolutely.
I don't think people realize that, but I mean, I just do it from a civic standpoint. Do I get to it maybe sometimes in the most timely manner? No, because I come in here and talk on the radio for a while, and then maybe I get a chance to go home later in the day and do that. But it's one of those where I think most people are good, but there are some that just don't get out and do that at all. And I brought up the fact of seeing examples when I drive around this town about, it'll be 4 or 5 days after a snowstorm, and people still haven't cleared their walks. And these are the people that I just don't know whether they just don't want to do it, they're too lazy, or we've got maybe property owners, because not everybody is actually owning their own property. Sometimes you're renting or leasing, whatever it might be, and you might have a landlord or something. I know that you guys put together some suggestions in terms of there's all kinds of different companies. I know there's elderly. I brought that fact up that sometimes people can't do it. I guess where do we go to find maybe the best solution? Because it doesn't sound like a lot of people are for this, and I'll get to another aspect of this argument as well here.
Well, you've hit the nail right on the head. There's a lot of concerns, and people do this differently. I watched very closely in my neighborhood where I live over the holiday season. Now, probably not the best time. There's people out of town. It took about 3 days for most of the people in the neighborhood to get their sidewalks cleared. You know, I know people that have one of the problems that I see. And this is my personal opinion with this ordinance with the 9 a.m. catch time is you're supposed to remove it by 9 a.m. the following day. Well, if you're on shift work, you could literally be in violation before you even got home from work. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously not something we want to do. We don't want to write an ordinance where we're catching people that are doing the right things, the 95% of the population that does the right things, that gets their snow shoveled off in a day or two. We don't want to catch them up in anything. That's not what we're going for. But it's a hard balance. So one of the things that hasn't been talked about but that I got a phone call about was, you know, part of the reason that we need to shovel the sidewalks is for people that are in wheelchairs and have disabilities, for our elderly. You know, one of the points that was made is that at a certain age, a slip and fall can be a serious medical concern.
Well, and as a property owner, I wouldn't want to be sued by that individual because you could be sued. And I don't think a lot of people think of it in that regard, which, you know, I'm not somebody who is a proponent for lawsuits or anything like that, but I just think that threat, I think, on top of just doing my own civic duty of keeping my own walks clear because I don't want my kids or my wife to slip and fall. But I don't know. I keep asking the community whether I'm thinking of this from the wrong perspective or not, and I know that there's another argument to this that I want to get to here in just a moment that you guys have probably heard left and right, but I just don't understand what the issue is about clearing snow from sidewalks. I mean, maybe it was just the way I was raised. I grew up, my parents, they just here's the shovel, go do it, you know. And I mean, at a certain age, it was, you know, my dad did it for a long time, but then at a certain age, my older sisters had to do it, and then I had to do it, and so it was like, you know what, and I do it, and I do it all the time now. And like I said, yeah, my schedule might be more flexible than some other people's, but there are times where heck, it's snowing when I come to work, and there's nothing I can really do about it.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it's, you know, wait till it's done. I get to it later, but I at least get to it in a what I think is a timely manner, so that it's not necessarily difficult for everybody. It might not be clean right away, but you know, if it's snowing, I also look at it from the standpoint of it's going to keep snowing. What good does it do me to shovel and clear it all right now?
I have done that again in 2 hours.
I have done that actually before, where I shovel before I come to work in the morning at like dark 30, and then I come back and there's like 4 or 5 more inches, and I'm going, why did I shovel?
Why did you do that?
Yeah, well, it helps. It does help. But anyways,
one of the other things that was discussed, and I think is a good change to the ordinance, is right now the current ordinance on the books says that, you know, the owner or the occupant or the person that's in charge of managing the property is responsible for shoveling the sidewalks. So what we've seen is a lot of, with the percentage of rentals we have in town, a lot of, well, the tenant's responsible or the landlord's responsible, and there's a lot of passing the buck. One of the changes we've made is to solely put this on the property owner. So the property owner is responsible for the shoveling of the sidewalks. So if you are a landlord and you're going to rent out to whomever, it's your responsibility to either contract to make sure they're shoveled, do it yourself, put it in your lease and require your tenants to, or whatever. But if there are issues at that residence, we're going to come back to the property owner. That provides a much clearer cut way for the city to deal with that, and it also kind of streamlines who's really responsible for that. And I think that's kind of a separate enforcement challenge that the city has had, but I hope that that's a good change.
Now, enforcement, you talked about that. You know, we're maybe adding this second notice. It looks like that's probably going to be the case. I know it was a tough vote.
It was 5-4.
Yeah, that one kind of surprised me about. Was it just people on the council don't like the change in the ordinance, or was it a 5-4 vote in terms of we didn't want to extend this vote a little longer?
You know, I think it was really about the issue itself.
Okay.
I think this is one of those issues that we're all kind of a little bit strained about. It's one of those issues where we've spent a lot of time talking about something that should be, at the end of the day, I think one of the council members said after the meeting, just shovel your sidewalks.
Exactly. That's the point.
That's the point. Yeah, how do we legislate that? Just shovel your sidewalks.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, we've been talking about snow removal on this program now for a calendar year. Let's just put it that way. Not every single show, but when you first came on the show last year, we were talking about, I had you on just after we got hit on a Wednesday, Thursday with a storm, and then the following like Monday, Tuesday, and we got dumped on Because here's the other argument that has come to you guys. I know you've had this.
Yep.
It's, well, I'll shovel my walk when you plow the streets. Which one has nothing to do with the other, by the way, and I keep reinforcing the fact we don't have the money for it. We don't have the manpower or the equipment to do it, to shovel every single street in this town. And it has never been that way in the history of this city, except for maybe going way, way, way back when there weren't that many streets.
Exactly. We've heard that argument. We've had people come to council. I've gotten some emails to that, and I know it's running all over social media right now. That's the argument. But one really has absolutely nothing to do with the other. And we want clean streets. We want clean sidewalks. Plowing streets is a whole different ballgame. It's a huge expense to plow streets. It's a huge expense to potentially cover all of the streets. I think we have something like 150 miles worth of streets in the city of Laramie. That's a lot, and I'm not sure that people really want us to spend their taxpayer dollars like that when it's so expensive.
Well, there's so much. Well, number one, you got hit with the budget reduction, just over $500,000 last year, and then number two, since I've been here for like 3 decades, I've never seen this city plow every single street. It's just not happening. So, give me a rough estimate. How much does this cost the city? Snow removal. Roughly, what do you guys budget? If you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I can tell you that when we had that really bad storm last year, the city spent almost $100,000 in emergency snow removal just to get the additional equipment and manpower hours to keep the arterials open. And I think we got maybe 9 or 10 inches at that point. It was just under a foot, I think, from one of the storms last year. And it's incredibly expensive. And the other thing right now is the city, with those city budget cuts, our streets department, which is in charge of snow plowing during the winter, we're down to about 50% manpower because of budget cuts. So we have a lot less people. We have some equipment, but we don't have the people to run those, and we can't hire those positions right now because of the current budget concerns.
And so with that, and the fact that I've never seen every single street plowed, I go back to, one has nothing to do with the other, but everybody wants to tie that together right now. Right. That's the biggest argument, I think, that you guys are hearing.
Right, it is. That's certainly the argument that's on social media and that we've gotten at council. And I sympathize with people. I get just as frustrated when, you can't, when you've had that slush melt off and then it crossed back over and, the streets are pretty rough to drive for a few days. I certainly understand that. But we also live in Laramie, Wyoming. Winter happens every year. And
what's funny is December, January, February are actually 3 of our driest months of the year. It's really the spring snowstorms that are more of the nuisance. And, well, if you listen to our meteorologists that we have on our station, it sounds like we're in store for a warmer, drier spring and summer, which doesn't bode well for wildfires, but that's
a whole different subject.
It's an entirely different subject. All right, so
we're still working on this. We still want people to give us our feedback. If people they really don't like this, which seems to be the sentiment, then they need to continue to make their voices heard.
Well, and okay, I'm a property owner. I'm a person. Again, I will swear up and down to you, left and right. You put me in front of a court of law or on the Bible, however you want to say it. I get out and shovel my walks as when I can get to them. I try and get to them as soon as possible. I'm also a person who goes out and will walk. I have a pet that I take care of that likes to walk. So with that in mind, I walk around and I see this and I just sit there shaking my head. And somebody raised that point and asked the city question about, well, if people don't shovel their sidewalks, then you put us walking on dangerous streets and then you're dodging traffic and things like that. It really is a safety hazard, and I think that's the bottom line for people. Hopefully they understand that.
Well, and that's why we can just go back to the simple, how do we legislate just asking people, please shovel your sidewalks. Just please shovel your sidewalks.